Sadly, with the setup, I have to stop listening to the music I was so enjoying, The Power of One, but I feel like in my struggles with Christianity, I've come to the realization that philosophically, Christianity is, well, it's undeniable, in a sense, in that the idea, this message I talked about, that you don't even need to read the Bible to be able to evaluate in some form or another that God, sort of the supreme being in the universe, decided to experience humanity by being conceived in the body of a woman without any other male influence. So, parthenogenesis, basically violating all our current known understanding of the way the universe works to our experience, and then lives a sinless, as in perfect life, did everything right at every moment, and then chose to spread this message of essentially oneness, that you should turn the other cheek because essentially the person who's hitting you is your brother, in that this world is all one giant organism and there's no escaping it, or at least certainly not until most recently, and that looks very bleak. But that humanity is a cooperative and communal species, and it literally just is the winning strategy to sacrifice for others, and then that life, so far perfect and perfectly created being, allows himself to be publicly murdered in the most horrific way when he could have escaped after one of his closest friends and disciples betrays him, and one of his final lines is, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." I mean, literally, it is a human recognizing that ultimately we're all in this together, in a sense. And where faith comes in is in believing that that transpired, and then most crucially was followed by a resurrection 3 days later. And I guess it bears mentioning that throughout this miraculously created life, he's performing miracles. Nevertheless, he does get tested by the devil, I believe. So, he feels temptation. He's clearly not infinitely powerful God incarnate. Like, he gave himself some level of human frailty, I'm saying. Some measure of imperfection, to go back to a previous analogy. And this being, in its resurrection, demonstrates that it has a mastery over our experience, the human experience, that we do not have. And, whatever language it's in, the fundamental, if you had to summarize it really, I think love, to one word, it would be love. And then, of course, how does it begin? I mean, in the beginning, there was the Word, and the idea of Word as God is so crucial. If you're my previously brought up and never got back to explore, I'm going to say European, though I'm sure there are many others, but people who got on boats with Bibles and went out and converted all manner of people who had just had no measure of linguistic communication based on logic or reasoning or just belief in just a evolved human mind. So if this transpired for real, and he resurrected, and he performed the miracles, and it's not been corrupted or mistranslated, it is in fact divine. You may notice I'm looking away because it's very uncomfortable even saying these things. Then it's terrifying, and it also means that we are in fact a lost world or some such thing. I also believe that the idea is so powerful that it could still have wrought the transformation that it has wrought, even without the miracle or the things that violate our understanding of physics. I'm saying that not intentionally to deny Jesus or the Bible. It's just that why it's not just a no-brainer to me is because the text was not put into word until so many decades later. And it's like, well, if you look at it from the one hand, well, a divine idea and divine experiences would be able to last perfectly for decades. It's just never happened for us, so we believe it's not possible. And then they were written down long before they were, had any creepings of man. That would be, I think, a believer would be very happy with that, and they would see no real issue with that. Whereas, of course, someone who's certainly achieved periods of what they might call enlightenment or a spiritual connection, just sort of what many others would say might best be called like the electrifying presence of God, something truly transformative, an experience that you've just never had before. Which I think if you connect with a religion is very powerful, but it's, when you have multiple religions and very devout people, such as, Islam, it does cloud the issue. Now, the more I learn and the more I see, debates between, I do think that Christianity is, it's kind of terrifying if either of them is correct, because they both have hell, which I think is just conceptually, just fundamentally cruel in my understanding of it, at least. But Christianity certainly, from an atheist or agnostic perspective, the message is just so much more, well, in line with American and Western values. But I mean, that's sort of circular. But it is so much more logically and logistically conducive to human flourishing, I would argue. I think that the nuclear family generated by Christian culture was incredibly effective at creating a prosperous life for a lot of people, like the vast majority. And I just feel there is such an ease in overinterpreting or that the words were morphed over the decades since the events happened. And, to someone who's always been atheistic, the idea of someone just miraculously having a recovery, well, actually, it just sounds super preposterous to even say. It's possible that Jesus was just the first person to really figure it out and effectively convey it, and knew that by invoking divine knowledge, he was trying to convey the power of the idea, which I guess is fundamentally blasphemous if it is in fact just like, we have to recognize that we are just we are imperfect compared to perfect. And the fear of hell is very real, but there's also this fear of waking up and finding that just a whole bunch of people or things or beings or intelligences are laughing at you, still laughing at you, because you just missed something massive. Which, of course, is how I will feel if I truly find Christianity to accurately reflect this experience of God becoming man, and then saying, all you have to do is believe in me, and you will enter the kingdom of the Father. But what does that actually mean? I mean, of course, that's the question, right? But fundamentally, some people did get to witness miracles and resurrection. And so, how fair is it to require faith when, imperfection is so natural to humanity? Why leave a message so important in the hands of man if it perhaps isn't actually, that you yourself exactly as a soul will experience time forever of constant suffering? But if you live a life that's separate from God, when you return to God, as we all do when we perish, because whatever that animating spirit that we call consciousness is, there could just be a measurable physics thing going on in the universe that we just don't have the tools to measure yet. And maybe in that rejoining with God, you actually feel shame, or, you literally hate yourself because you, with divine wisdom, see that you have only done damage to yourself and therefore should be shunned. But conceptually, in a sense, we're all part of God and a reflection of God. So God's judgment is a judgment of himself, which is interesting. Anyways, I've been very down today.